How will Donald Trump's election win impact your money, your investments, and New Zealand property prices? Well, Politico said that economists thought that a Trump win would tank the markets. CNN Business, they claimed that a Trump win would sink stocks. And the Washington Post warned that President Trump could destroy the world economy. Now stop. Breathe for a second. All of those headlines, all of those predictions were made leading up to the 2016 US election campaign. And what actually happened? Property and share prices rose. The world economy, it's still standing. So how will Donald Trump's win in the White House really impact us over here in New Zealand? Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. I'm Ed, an economist here at Opus Partners. And look, I know this is a really controversial topic, but I've heard from both Donald Trump's New Zealand-based supporters and his detractors both asking how will his win impact us here in New Zealand. So we're going to talk about it, and I'll make you a deal. I'll be as unbiased as I can on this topic, as long as we can keep it civil down in the comment section. Now, before we get into Trump's policies, it's worth looking at how other US presidents have impacted Kiwi property prices. Now, we can see there are sometimes ups, there are sometimes downs, but the trend is similar. New Zealand property prices went up under every single US president's time in office. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about Democrats like Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, or Barack Obama, where house prices went up a massive 74%, or even Republicans like Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, or George Bush, both senior and junior. And it's a similar trend actually when you look at it with New Zealand politicians and who's in power at the time. Property prices tend to go up over the long term. It doesn't tend to matter who's sitting in the White House or the Beehive. And the wrong way to think about Kiwi property prices under Trump would be to pause this video, take a screenshot, zoom in really close and say, when do property prices go up faster? When Democrats or Republicans are in office? That's the wrong way. Because let's say you had 100K back in 1970, which to be fair was a lot of money back then. But that is the earliest time I could get data about New Zealand property prices from the OECD. Now, if you only invested during Democratic presidencies, your money would be worth $334,000 by 2024. Now, if you'd only invested under Republican presidencies, you'd have $2.7 million. Now, this is not because American presidents from the Republican Party are necessarily better for New Zealand property prices. It's just because of where we're starting the data. Back in the 70s and 80s, there were a whole heap of Republican presidents in a row, and so that's why you get a bigger number. If I went back even further, if I could get the data, and there were a whole heap of Democrat presidents in a row, you might find that actually investing under Democrat presidents would have made you more money. But stick with me because I'm actually going somewhere with this. So in this example, you've got 334 grand if you only invested with the Democrats in the Oval Office, and 2.7 mil if you only invested when Republicans were in office. But what happened if you just invested and you didn't care who was in the White House, you just invested from 1970 through today? You'd have $9.2 million worth of property. And so the message is to continue investing no matter which party is in power, because that's what gets you the biggest returns over time. But I get that a lot of you will still say, okay, Ed, I get all of this, but what about Trump's policies? What does that mean for the New Zealand economy? Well, to keep my promise of being unbiased, I'm going to look at both sides. We're going to start with the arguments for Trump being good for your back pocket, and then we're going to make the argument that Trump will be bad for your money. And that way you can decide which arguments you find more persuasive. And if you want to see more of these videos, do me a quick favor and hit the like button. That's how I know which videos you actually want to see more of. Subscribing, that helps too. We've just smashed our goal of getting 20,000 subscribers. Now we're aiming for 50,000. There's one school of thought that says Trump will be good for the economy. That includes people like former Prime Minister John Key, who, while acknowledging that there are some potential downsides to Trump's victory for New Zealand, he made the argument that Trump wants lower corporate taxes. That means that businesses keep more of their money and it boosts their post-tax profits. That makes companies more valuable.
You know, there is some downsides for New Zealand. I'm not trying to sugarcoat that, and they do concern me because we need trade. But I think it won't all be negative. It won't all be one-way traffic.
And we see that since Trump's win, stock prices are up 5% since the election. Trump also wants a more America First trade policy. That's where goods coming into the States are taxed. Now, that is going to protect some American companies from offshore competition, which could improve the profits of those specific companies. Now, the interesting thing is you might own shares in some of those companies through your KiwiSaver or an index fund. So that could improve your finances. But then there's another school of thought, which was represented literally the morning I'm recording this article by BMI, which is a research firm who were quoted in the New Zealand Herald. They argue that we are a small exporting nation here in New Zealand. We sell stuff to the rest of the world. Now, if America starts taxing our imports, and especially if other countries follow, that could hurt our exporters, people who are making stuff in New Zealand and selling it overseas. Now, that could have a flow-on effect to the New Zealand economy if those exporters don't do well. The other thing to keep in mind is that Trump wants to curb illegal immigration into the States, and that includes deporting some people who are currently working within America. Now, fewer workers would push up American wages, which is a good thing if you're working in the US, but it could make American goods more expensive. The stuff that we buy over here in New Zealand that is exported and made over in America. Now, if that stuff gets more expensive, that could raise our inflation rate. And the fear is that if inflation is a bit higher, then maybe your mortgage interest rate won't come down as fast. And if that happened, it could slow the pace of further interest rate cuts. Not stopping them, but slowing them down. See how easy it is to construct two very different narratives. If you want to believe that Trump will be good for your money, you can find reasons to tell yourself you're right. And if you want to believe that Trump will be bad for your money, you can find reasons to make yourself feel right too. So it's really important to keep things in perspective, because even if BMI is right, the research company I was telling you about before who think Trump's going to be bad for New Zealand, by their forecasts, New Zealand's economy is still going to grow by 1.8% next year. That is slightly down to the 2% they thought before Trump was elected. Now, let me put that in perspective for you. That is about $3 per person per week. That's not your income going down by $3. It just means that your income or the size of our economy won't grow by about $3 per person per week. You're probably not going to notice the difference in terms of the size of the economy. And I know that people have very strong feelings about the Don, and I'm running the risk of annoying both the people who really like him and also the people who don't like him by presenting two sides to it. And I get there might be someone down in the comment section saying, Ed, stay out of politics, stick with investments. And that's kind of my point. Ultimately, over here in New Zealand, most of us can't even vote in the US election. We can't control who's in the White House. What you can control is when you invest and how long you stay in the market. And as we've seen, people who invest, no matter what is going on in the world, no matter who is in the Oval Office or the Beehive, they tend to do better over the long term.